Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the future. I'm Zach Gardner, the chief architect at Keyhole Software, and I set out on a mission not too long ago. I'd heard everyone talk about generative AI, and I felt like I needed to play catch up. I needed to sprint. I needed to try to get a head start because everyone was talking about it, and I didn't feel like I knew enough about it. So I scoured the internet. I found people in defense, in healthcare, in policy, in you name it. But there's only a few people that I've found that have a very broad, a very forward thinking, a very futurist perspective that agreed to come on the show. And I have, for you all today, one of these people coming to us live from about a little over 3,000 miles away from where I'm sitting, I guess. Your background, though, you look like you're in the future, just like me, too. So I dig it. Dr. Mark van Rijemenam, also known as the digital speaker. How's it going?
Oh, very good, Zach. Great to be on your show. I'm very much looking forward to this discussion and just dive into the future.
Awesome. And just as a reminder, all the views and opinions expressed in the program are the views and opinions of the participants and do not reflect their employer, trade organizations, any yacht clubs that they are affiliated with, any loyalty cards that they have. This is just two guys. We're just talking. That's all. So to get us started off with, I did a little bit of research on you. You've written 40 books on a bunch of different topics, things like, 6 books, many different topics, metaverse, data orgs, blockchain. You've gotten 40, that was the number I was thinking of, 40 awards from various institutions. You have a masterclass on digital transformation. You have a digital avatar, which is I think, a first for this video cast. So why don't you give the people that haven't had the opportunity to, subscribe to your newsletter, to get to know you, just a little bit about yourself. How did you get into becoming a futurist? I guess that's my big question.
Well, that's the question I get a lot. How do you become a futurist? And although you do have education and programs nowadays to actually become a futurist, it sort of happened to me over the years. So I've been doing this for over 12 years, and I consider myself a strategic futurist. So I really try to look at the future from a strategic perspective, and I do so by to help organizations, Fortune 500 companies all around the world, and governments to help them understand what's going on with these new technologies. And I've moved from big data to blockchain to crypto to the metaverse to AI. So I sort of follow the different trends and try to understand how they work. And I always try to live and breathe these cutting edge technologies myself, because I think if you have to practice what you preach in order to be really helpful to organizations. So that's why I do these technologies. I was the first person in the world to deliver a TED talk in virtual reality. I was the first person, I think, who delivered a TED talk with my digital twin. I wrote a book with ChatGPT 5 days after ChatGPT was launched, which for me helped to understand that that launch of that product was a paradigm shift, and that the world had changed since then. And as you mentioned, I have my digital twin, so I've digitally cloned myself, and you can talk to me, or my digital twin, I have to say, via text, audio, and video on demand in 28 different languages, which I think is pretty cool. I also run a newsletter in which about, I think, 20 or 30,000 people follow me, which is called Synthetic Minds, where we dive into the future and what will this synthetic future bring us. And finally, I've just started, and it hasn't been launched yet, but I started my 4th podcast, where I'm interviewing science fiction writers, because I believe science fiction writers are very, very good at looking into the future. And I believe that as organizations, we can learn from them, and we should learn from them to have a bit more long-term perspective. So I've done a few episodes now. It's fantastic, fascinating insights. So I really live and breathe cutting-edge technologies, and I have a long-term perspective. And one final thing that I forgot to mention, which I think is quite important, is that I consider myself an optimistic dystopian, which is a bit of an oxymoron. I'm very well aware of that, but it helped me to understand the positive, sort of the good, the bad, and the ugly of these technologies. And we need to understand the bad and the ugly in order to ensure that we end up in the good. That's what I always share with organizations as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, very interesting. I always like to nerd out with people that have read, like Isaac Asimov, this sort of 3 laws of robotics. I think some of that stuff might be very prescient. He definitely saw some things that could be an issue and, sort of already anticipated them before they were.
Absolutely. I've just finished watching The Three Body Problem on Netflix.
That's next.
And for those who haven't watched it, it's great. It's really, really good. And the whole the different perspectives that he takes on among other technologies, as well as societal issues, is absolutely fascinating. So yeah, can definitely recommend that one.
Mm-hmm. Likewise, that's next on our queue. Back when Netflix used to have queues because they used to send you DVDs through the snail mail. Anyway, so I guess since this video cast does have a generative AI flavor to it, I'm curious if you could first talk about your experience writing a book with ChatGPT. Like, what were some of the things that it helped you with? Were there areas, maybe issues where it was like, well, it didn't really give me what I wanted and you kind of had to tweak it? Like, just what was that process like working with a completely digital being as your co-author?
Well, it was a fascinating process. And actually, I put ChatGPT as a co-author on the book because it did the most work. So, but yeah. So basically, how the process went is when I found out about ChatGPT when it was launched, I wanted to dive in straight up. So I said to ChatGPT, look, we're going to write a book about technologies and how they change in the next 50 years or so, and which technologies should we cover. So it came back with a list of technologies. Such as AI, obviously, such as synthetic biology, robotics, those kind of things. And then for each technology, I asked it, okay, well, given these technologies, which questions do I need to ask you in order to, craft a narrative for this book, looking from now to 50 years in the future? So it came back with a long list of questions. And so for each technology, I went through this list of questions to have a dialogue with ChatGPT, which in itself was fascinating. And then I literally copied and pasted the answers into my manuscript. And the only thing I did was sort of move sentences up and down to make a better story, but I didn't add anything or whatsoever. The other thing that I did is I had to remove some things that it wrote because I quickly found out that what we now call hallucinations were quite present in the book. For example, when it said, robotics and AI converged in the 1980s to create self-driving cars. Well, if only that had happened, would have been, I think our society would look a lot different today. So when I finished the book, it's about 150 pages. When I finished the book, I edited with AI, with Grammarly. And then I said, okay, now come up with a title. It came up with Future Visions. I said, come up with a subtitle. It came up with a subtitle. And then we created a description for the book cover, which I used DALL-E to create the cover, which the first cover was, immediately right, which looks a little bit like your background, which was good because the covers for my other books that were written by me, and the cover designed by my publisher took a long time to agree on the cover. So this was a much better experience. And so when I finished the book, I asked ChatGPT to write me a review, and it wrote me a glowing review of the book. So it was a fascinating experience.
Very interesting. I mean, I think too, one of the other use cases I've heard being able to just like writer's block, you sit there, you have this just blank canvas for you to imprint your thoughts upon. And for a lot of people, that can be very intimidating. So a lot of people are using it just to just get a rough outline, just get some ideas down. I mean, it is interesting that you mentioned Dolly, that's actually what I use to be able to create the background image for the video cast. This, however, this is from something I found on Amazon. It's 100% real, by the way. I think it's from someplace in Pakistan.
Well, you never know now these days what's real, what's
Right.
fake.
Right.
Obviously, I'm not on a distant planet.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Sydney feels pretty distant. One of the other people that I've heard that have used it was Seth Steven Davowitz. I think I'm saying his name right. He was able to write a book in 30 days about NBA statistics because he had just so much data, but he knew it was going to take him forever if he wanted to comb through it. He wanted to be able to get insights out of it. So it's like, how much of a percent increase comes from being able to, be playing in the NBA for every inch, every centimeter that gets added on to your height. And there were certain names I think that he found were just like crazy indicators that you would play in the NBA. It was something like Malcolm, or something like that. It had like
Okay.
some leading indicators to it. So it's just tools like Chat GPT really allow you to be able to get insights that are synthesized from so many different sources. You and I, we have, few trillion neurons in our brain. We can only keep so many things in there at one time. Before kids, I could keep a little bit more than I can now. And one of the things that allows you to do is to, just sort of see things that, maybe others would miss. And there's a lot of opportunities, but there's risks with all this stuff. I, I'm curious if you come across, like some really interesting articles and like what are the risks? What are some of the things that people are thinking about other than, the obvious hallucinations?
Well, I think hallucination is one of the biggest risks, because a large language model doesn't know what it doesn't know or what it knows. And a large language model has no idea. It's not intelligent. People attribute intelligence to these large language models, but it's not intelligence. It's just statistics, just a probability machine that, given the context of word A, the most likely word to follow is word B. But then it does it at blazing fast speed. So it's not intelligence, and we tend to anthropomorphize all the time. And I think that's one of the biggest risks here. It's not so much the risk of the chatbot, but it's the risk of us humans anthropomorphizing it. And I catch myself that I talk about ChatGPT sometimes like a he or a she, and I really try to call it an it, because it is an it. It's not a he or a she. But it's we all anthropomorphize. That's something that we humans do naturally. If we see a bus with two eyes and a funny front, we see a face. So we anthropomorphize, and that's good. That's from long term, and it's in our genes. So it's something we can't really stop. But when it comes to AI, I think we shouldn't anthropomorphize, because if we do anthropomorphize, we give it more credibility than it deserves, and I think that can be dangerous. So I think it's not so much, hallucination is a big problem, and I think we should really focus on be very wary about that. Although I must say that when we talk about synthesizing and summarizing, hallucinations are less of a problem. I think synthesizing and summarizing is one of the key use cases of these large language models. And in fact, I'm building a company around that as well, to sort of help you be in the know of whatever's going on in your field of interest without having to sift through hundreds of articles or having to subscribe to dozens of newsletters. And that is sort of a killer use case for these large language models, because they're very good, especially with the token length becoming longer and longer, to synthesize and to summarize a piece of content. So that I think is absolutely fascinating. Hallucination is a problem, but I think by now we should know that you can't trust what a large language model is giving back to you, unless it's very constrained. We say summarize this piece. But if you ask him, ask it to tell you what the best medication is for a certain health problem you have, please don't trust it.
Absolutely. I don't trust Google most of the time on that answer. It maybe this is just at the top of mind too, but I always hear us refer to them as chatbots. I almost wonder if that's a misnomer. Because they're really designed not to chat, they're designed to get answers. So maybe they're actually should be called an answer bot. And I think something that would be interesting for someone to build would be the inverse of that, a question bot that is not allowed to give you an answer. It's like Socrates. It's designed specifically to give you only questions, things that you're not thinking about, blind spots that you might have.
I like that perspective. Although I'm not sure if I completely agree with it, because I think the chat functionality, these bots, give you better answers if you have a dialogue with them. Yes, they are meant to give an answer, but the answers will become better if you have a dialogue. For example, if I asked it to I don't know, craft an email or whatever, or summarize something, I will then ask it to critique what it had just done, and then it comes back with a list of critiques, and then I asked it, given the list of critiques, now improve it, and then starts improving it. So it's a completely new way of dealing and talking to computers, because we need to be able to ask the right questions. And from that perspective, a question bot can be quite interesting. But I think it's not that difficult to program a large language model to just restrict it to only give answers back. You have to just prompt it in the right way. And I think that's often a mistake that people make, is that you just ask a question and you get an answer. Yes, you do, but the answer is not that good. You have to go deeper and provide the context. If you want a legal question answered, you tell the ChatGPT that it's a lawyer. Tell it from which country, because that determines which legal content it incorporates. So those kind of things are really, really important, I think. And it's a funny thing is, research has shown that asking nicely and politely by saying please makes a difference. I always do that just because, in case of the AI overlords come to hunt us, at least I can always be nice to them. But it actually does make a difference, that you get better answers if you include the word please in your prompt. It's fascinating.
Interesting. And I hadn't thought about the nuance too of saying, well, pretend you're a lawyer from Luxembourg, because that's going to give you very EU specific responses. And I think it's top of mind. I was at a presentation this morning on the EU AI Act, and there's some really interesting stuff that it's slowly. I'm surprised, honestly, from a regulatory standpoint, how quickly they were able to get some of this stuff up. Just they knew that the floodgates were going to be open with this tool, and there's certain banned practices that they have, like you can't exploit vulnerable populations with any AI tool that you write. There's even dark patterns, which is like subliminal messaging, that they've just said, no, you cannot do this. Deep fakes, being able to impersonate people. Parts of that came out in the Biden executive order back in October. And actually, from your newsletter, I got schooled on some things that I had never really thought about. Was from China. Like they have forbidden AI use cases as well, which might be a little bit different than what we would consider forbidden. But the African Union coming out with stuff like that. So from a regulatory standpoint, I'm curious: are there any other things that you're following? Anything that you're kind of seeing come down the pipe that people that are implementing this should be aware of?
Well, I think what one of the things that China is doing is we can, from a regulatory standpoint, we could learn from China, and I find it always fascinating that we don't want to learn from China, and that everything that is Chinese is bad, which I disagree. Yes, I disagree with a lot of things they say and how they see the world, but I think especially when it comes to AI, we should learn from each other. And one thing that China is doing is that every large language model that wants to be published needs to be approved by a regulatory body. And probably will disapprove some things that we in the West would approve, but it's also a good thing, because one of the things that I worry about is that these large language models are being released way too soon, way too fast, driven by an arms race, driven by capitalism. And that's not necessarily the best outcome for society. And I can give loads of examples of these things causing terrible harm in our society. So this is sort of my dystopian side talking. So I think we should be more open to learn from China. And one of the examples that was I think about a half year ago, I think Andreessen Horowitz, they released their optimist post, why everyone should be a techno optimist, and basically the whole reason of his post was technology will solve all our problems. All we have to worry about is China, which I thought was absolutely hilarious. That you look at the world from that perspective. first of all, technology will not solve all the problems. Second of all, technology will cause a lot of problems. And third, yes, we need to worry about China as much as we need to worry about India from a competing perspective. But from an AI perspective, I think we should collaborate because AI doesn't know any borders. So we need to collaborate. We need to work together. And fortunately, there is some initial conversations going between the US and China to see how they can collaborate. But this needs to be done a lot more. And unfortunately, the United Nations released an AI resolution on this as well recently. So there are things happening, but this needs to happen a lot faster and at a global level. And yes, we should be wary about China, but we should also collaborate with them.
Definitely. So pivoting now to the optimist side of the optimistic dystopian, there's a lot of interesting things that are coming down in just the next few months. Apple is going to have one of their big shows, and the theme of it undoubtedly is going to be artificial intelligence. I mean, I love this thing. But when you compare what a new Galaxy can do, where it has natural language processing that runs on the edge device, like, I'm sorry, iPhone, I love you, but I know you can't do that yet. So I think that's going to be something that I'm very hopeful for, that I'll get maybe in the next iteration. Sam Altman even proposed like a $7 trillion reimagining of like the silicone chip, which like I had to look. I thought it was 7 billion, but I looked, it's 7 trillion. I'm curious.
Which, by the way, he claims he never said, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, I'm sure, Sam. What are some of the other things that you're monitoring? What are some of the things that make you optimistic about this technology?
Well, this technology is so powerful, and I use it in everything I do. And one technology that was released a couple of weeks ago is Suno.ai, where you can create music. So I was giving a talk last week here in Sydney, and I thought I would do something completely different. I created a song specifically for this event, and with the lyrics talking about the event. And I created a dance song, and I started off my keynote doing a little dance on the stage, which everyone was like, what the hell is this guy doing? But I thought it was quite funny. And when I then said to everyone that the song that you just heard was created in 30 seconds, people were just blown away. And because it was actually a pretty good song, and with songs and lyrics and and singers, multiple singers, and it blew my mind. So that's something that is fascinating that is possible. In the coming months, we'll see a lot more of that, where generative AI will become much better at creating videos, of which Sora is a great indication. Generative AI will become a lot better at creating virtual worlds, of which the first tools are becoming available as well. And creating an entire virtual world is really, really difficult. And I actually think that I read that Midjourney is also looking into this as well, to create entire virtual worlds. And I love Midjourney, so this background is from Midjourney. And that is absolutely fascinating. And what also the development that I find absolutely fascinating is the combination of robotics and generative AI. I'm not sure if you've seen the video Figure 1, which was released a couple of weeks ago. That completely blew my mind. And I live at the cutting edge, so I see a lot from this space, and there's not much that truly blows my mind anymore. But that blew my mind. The way it was interacting and operating, and it was just being very natural, and especially the voice was quite scary. So maybe you can link it in the shows for the listeners. But that was an absolutely an awestruck moment, and I think. And I actually made it one of my predictions for 2024 is that the integration between large language models, multimodal large language models, and humanoids is going to create sort of a new species where we have these humanoids that can interact with us in our daily lives, whether it's in a factory, whether it's in a coffee shop, whether it's in a hospital. Because they have the capabilities to see the world and to perceive the world a little bit as we do. And I think that is absolutely fascinating developments. And there's a lot more to come from that area.
That is a perfect way to wrap this up. I think that is probably one of the best answers that I've heard for the fear that I just sense in people for, are these things going to replace us? If anything, that's just another tool. it's just like this clip I got here. Granted, that's a lot cooler than the clip. I mean, I'll love to see the day when Chat GPT can close some, chips that I have. But that's it. It's a tool, and we're going to become more efficient for it. So,
Well,
Dr.
if I
Rijemenam,
can just have my
yeah.
my dystopian side
Oh
close,
yeah,
make a
absolutely.
closing statement, because I think it's important to be aware of that as well. And because I do think that these technologies will have a dramatic impact on society, and I think that it will cost at least 20, if not maybe 40% of the world's jobs, which is between 1 and 2 billion jobs in the world, and people forget that. And I think this is also a clarion call for societies and for governments around the world to wake up, and to prepare their society for this, because by 2040 we might have 1 billion humanoids joining our workforce, replacing jobs, and these jobs are not coming back, unless a lot of people thinking these jobs are not coming back. So we have to reimagine our society, and that takes a lot of time. So this is also something that I'd like to argue, that we need to wake up to this. Yes, it's an amazing technology. Yes, it will improve society, but it will also disrupt society, and we need to think about this.
As all good technological innovations do, and often for the better. So, no, Dr. Rijemenam, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed this. Thank you so much for the time.
Pleasure. Thanks for being here.
And ladies and gentlemen, we'll catch you in the future.